everyone, welcome to Positive Takes. I wanted to make a quick little video on Wicked. So I just saw this movie for the first time, and it's my first time seeing Wicked anything. My only other familiarity with the material at all is from being a big fan of reading the original L. Frank Baum books, and from watching the original Wizard of Oz, as well as Return to Oz. I have also read a few chapters of the book that Wicked is based on, although based on how the movie played out, there wasn't really, that much overlap necessarily. There's a good amount of material. Like for example, I think in the chapters I read, they spent a lot more time talking about Elphaba's childhood and her parents and all that backstory that they didn't really include in this movie necessarily. So just in terms of a movie, this one really blew me away, and I've intentionally been sort of avoiding hearing other people's takes, just because I don't want to hear the onslaught of people being negative for no particular reason. But just through osmosis, I'm actually realizing that a lot of the reception has actually been very positive, which is great. Because again, I thought this movie was very good. So this movie was directed by John Chu, who did Crazy Rich Asians, a few of the Step Up films. I think Into the Heights, which is another film that I quite enjoyed. Although that one has sort of mixed reception for whatever reason. I think kind of maybe when it came out, it's kind of a COVID movie. Anyway, as far as this movie goes, I wasn't really sure what to expect, having never seen the stage musical, and having only sort of a passing familiarity with the story. So, in my mind, I didn't think that they ever even became friends, the two main people. I thought they would just be kind of like bitter rivals throughout the film and movie. But as it turns out, they actually become best friends, and that's kind of what the central plot line of this one is, at least. And again, I have no idea what happens in part two, aside from maybe some spoiler things about Elphaba's actual father, that I won't talk about here, in case anyone else will get spoiled. So in this movie, we kind of trace the development and the birth, the conception, and the early adulthood of Elphaba, otherwise known as the Wicked Witch of the West. They did a really cool thing at the beginning where they kind of show you the end point, and you get some nice visual references to Dorothy and her friends, walking back to the wizard to present the broomstick, as well as just seeing some visual cues that reorient you to the Oz of the very much of the original movie. There was also a cool thing at the beginning where they had a very old-timey Universal logo. I don't know if that's going to be their new logo going forward, if it's just a special thing, but for me, I thought it was a really cool logo, and I hope they do keep using it going forward. So the plots, we have Glinda coming down to kind of rejoice with everyone, saying the Wicked Witch is dead, and then they immediately burn an effigy of the Wicked Witch, which is pretty dark, for what's ostensibly sort of a kids movie, sort of an all ages thing. We also see, as soon as we get the flashback, people are asking Glinda, how did you know her? Were you friends? We heard you went to school with her, and this and the other thing. She's like, yeah, I knew her, and that's when the flashbacks start happening. We learn about how Elphaba was actually born. I'm not quite sure if I'm saying that name correctly, but I'll do my best there. And we see that she was the product of somebody, somebody committing infidelity with her and her mother, with her mother, and that's how she was produced. And we see this person who is drinking copious quantities of some sort of potion, so maybe trying to make destiny happen, make a fate thing happen. Not quite sure. I'm sure they'll resolve that in part two. They showed that she kept the bottle throughout her life, and that's obviously an object of great importance to her. So from then, we kind of skip forward, and we see how she was in childhood, and we also see immediately, upon birth, that she has all these amazing magical powers. She's able to make everything in the room go to the top of the room. And we also see that immediately her father kind of hates her, kind of just out of pocket for no reason, just because she's green, essentially. And you can also see throughout the movie that this greenness is kind of a metaphor for otherness of all sorts. Based on the casting, you can also see it kind of a metaphor for race specifically, kind of an African American experience. It's kind of interesting to me because in the original play, she was of course played by Idina Menzel, so it's kind of interesting that presumably in the original version there wasn't quite that heavy metaphor in it. So it's just interesting to me how that played out in this one. So we check in briefly at the young childhood. We see that she now has a sister. The sister is in a wheelchair, and we're not quite sure how. We see again that Elphaba can't quite control her powers. She's like making stones move to throw at the kids. And let me just take a moment here to also compliment the use of practical sets, the use of lots of practical effects. Very little CGI at all, aside from like flying monkeys and maybe some like filling in background stuff. I'm not quite sure what's real and what's CGI'd. It's kind of a mix of stuff there. So just love to see all the practical sets throughout. When they eventually go to Shiz University, and then when they go to the Emerald City, and even the initial set of just seeing like Munchkin Land, which we all know from The Wizard of Oz. Just seeing this all be like real, physical, tangible locations, and the cinematography can like play off that. It's kind of interesting seeing this movie after like seeing like tons of MCU movies and action movies, how they are not like so hyper focused on different things. You can kind of have like some play of like what's soft focused and what's sharply focused. So we got a lot of very intense close-ups on various characters throughout the movie. So we just know that her sister is the more beloved one because she's not green, she's not different, doesn't have magic, but we don't know why she's in a wheelchair, and there is an explanation later in the movie. It's quite tragic. So from then we skip forward a lot, and now they're going to university, and we have Elphaba bringing her sister to go to university, and immediately everyone's like, why is there a green person here, and so on. And again, you get that sort of like otherness and race stuff again. It's also interesting because I assume in the original play, a part of it's also that Idina Menzel is quite tall, so maybe some of like her height was also part of the otherness, but obviously in this one they kind of drop all that. From here we have her first encounter with who's then known as Galinda, played by Ariana Grande, and this is someone who's like a very much type A personality. Everyone's met someone like this, or maybe everyone is someone like this. Just like very privileged, very hoity-toity, kind of annoying, really, just because she's just kind of responding to things without the proper background, and she doesn't actually, know as much about what's going on as she claims to, and that all can be very frustrating. And we have them kind of having whatever the opposite of a meet cute is, like a meet hate or something, where they immediately become like bitter rivals. And I should also point out that Elphaba, the Wicked Witch, is played by Cynthia Erivo, an actor I mostly know from Widows and The Outsider, and she's been really excellent in both. Apparently both her and Ariana Grande have like a big theater experience, so that's kind of, how they parlayed that into being in this movie, I suppose. So yeah, most of, I guess, the middle of the plot just concerns these two having a bitter rivalry, and how Galinda's, the popular one. A lot of this is also like, high school dynamics kind of being played out in college, with Galinda wanting to be like the Sorcerer Supreme, essentially, wants to be Michelle Yeoh's like prize student, but instead Elphaba immediately shows off her powers by accidentally lifting up her sister in the wheelchair and everything else in that big, starting hall, so everybody immediately is like, oh, what's going on? And Michelle Yeoh does take responsibility for that, but she also recognizes that Elphaba actually has the magical powers and all that stuff. So there's also like a lot of crossover between this and like kind of the setup of like a Harry Potter or something, maybe intentional, maybe not. So anyway, there's this another big musical moment where it's just saying how much they loathe each other, and just doing like a quick little montage of like Galinda and all her friends being mean and leaving Elphaba out, and the friends are played by Bowen Yang and I think Kiela Settle, and the sister is played by Marissa Bode. You also have to bear in mind, the other friend is Bronwyn James. And we also see, various ways that a lot of the headmasters and headmistresses are very, like, they want things to go very perfectly in a very certain way, and they don't like also this otherness and this magic and all these weird goings on, and they're treating the sister very, like, kind of unkindly, kind of like assuming she wants them to push her in her wheelchair, and she keeps saying, I don't want to be pushed, and all that stuff. So Galinda and Elphaba become roommates, so they're kind of forced to clash, shades of like Wednesday or something, where we have this like very, emo type person, and then a very like, again, type A, bubbly type personality. So, you only start realizing what the essential plot of the movie is as it goes on. They start taking classes. You don't really see that much of Alphaba's actual classes with Michelle Yeoh's character. It's just very brief. It's like, oh, just use your anger and stuff like that. Again, they do use practical effects when possible, which I really appreciated. But the central plot starts to become, we find out via a goat professor who's, played by Peter Dinklage. And then earlier on, we also see that there's a mural that's been obscured of all these animals teaching. So we get kind of the implication that, like, this school used to be more, like, co-human, co-animal. And at some point, they just switched over, and we're not quite sure why. So we learn from this goat teacher that, things are gonna go kind of dark in Oz. And also bear in mind, this isn't the same world as in the original Oz, where everyone's nice and good. This is more of a revisionist take. Think like Grendel with Beowulf, or like Maleficent, or The Whites or Ghosts of the Sea, or any of these various takes. I think they're even going to do another one with Jane Austen soon. So it's any of these stories where you kind of have like the original story that we all know, and then we're saying, but maybe it's not quite that way. In this case, we learn that, Elphaba isn't so bad. It's so much as everyone in Oz is super terrible, for whatever reason. So again, we immediately learn that there's some sort of plot to kind of target these animals that can talk, and either let them go off into the forest where they'll lose their ability to talk, or maybe even lock them up in cages so they'll, from birth, so they'll never be able to talk. And you can see there's obviously a lot of shades between what's going on in the movie and what's going on right now in real life, with the ways that people are kind of making people into their enemies and targeting them based on just their race or their class or any of these, outside markers. So we see it's like that very clear metaphor. It's kind of interesting because I assume this was the same plot as in the original stage musical, but it plays out very differently right now in 2024 post-election season. As far as the musical component goes, I think both of these leads are really amazing. I think the Elphaba actor is like kind of doing her own thing, kind of making it her own very much, whereas Ariana Grande, I think, is kind of paying tribute, significantly to Kristen Chenoweth, the originator of the character, as well as, I assume, any of the other actresses in between there. I was very much impressed with Ariana Grande's performance, having never seen her act before. I haven't watched any of those Disney Channel and whatevers, so I had no idea she could act to begin with. I'm not like a huge fan of Ariana Grande, but I certainly am aware of her and her, very eccentric personality, so to speak. So, seeing her as a performer, she actually has great comic timing. She's always like doing some funny little bit of patter. So, she did a really good job, but I would say, Erivo really stole the show in a lot of ways. And it's kind of like, it's a very pleasant, character to inhabit, in the sense that, like, she's very much the Mary Sue archetype, where, like, everyone's against her, and she is still standing up for what's right and what's good. So, the audience very much has them on her side, but at the same token, that isn't enough to just, like, sell the character. It is very much the performance, very much the inhabiting, very much a display of, like, otherness and, like, strength under perseverance that kind of shines through. This all builds up to the point where they have, like, a big ball, or actually before that they introduce this character, Prince Fiero. It's a funny last name, but I'm not going to go into why. This is someone I know has the same name. But basically we see how this guy seems to really enjoy Elphaba's company, but he just kind of like falls into being Galinda's boyfriend just because they are so similar in lots of different ways. He has this great musical act where he's kind of like just running around in the study hall and making a mess of things. Now, somebody will have to analyze better about how they actually performed this. But basically, they have this library where all the ladders are spinning around as the performers are spinning around, jumping over, somersaulting over, swinging themselves through. I don't know if they, like, edited together multiple takes and somehow just made it work, but it's just, like, completely seamless the way they did that whole section. And to be completely honest, like, I'm not a big Broadway guy, so some of the choreography stuff does kind of exhaust me. But it's all very well done, certainly not knocking it at all from that level. Anyway, this all builds to them going to the ball, which you know. I should say Galinda's friends kind of like dare her to give this hideous to them hat to Elphaba and tell her it's like some great looking hat, and tell her to go to the basically prom that everyone's going to. And when she does, everyone laughs at her and says all these mean things, just not pleasant to her. But instead of just like leaving or like just taking that in stride or like I don't know, giving into her feelings. Instead, she stays and stands her ground and like does a little dance to kind of shove it in their faces in a way. And that's when Galinda actually, has this emotional reaction, comes out and joins her. And you can certainly do some like queer readings into this film if you wanted to. Their relationship does become very close. And you can also look to the original book where the Wicked Witch is portrayed as a bit more non-binary, not necessarily just like a woman. But anyway, they have like a charged moment, and from that moment on, they decide they're actually going to become friends, and that immediately leads into the big popular number. I could see like fans of this play, and again, I don't really go into fandom that much really. I enjoy a thing, but I don't like, obsess about it or go to performances in costume or anything like that. But anyway, I bet fans were waiting with bated breaths to see how both the popular moment would go, and then also the defying gravity moment, the two big moments from Act 1 of the play. And I think in both cases they did them really service. They both did them really good service because the way the popular musical moment goes is it starts very like simply, like kind of like if you're not paying attention, then you won't even notice that they're going into it. But then performance is really good, with lots of good like physical comedy and lots of good like cinematography and like motions and mirroring and all this great stuff. And just the song itself is performed really well. And you get the overall message that she wants to help her become popular, but not as popular as her. So then it goes further into now agents of somebody are actually coming, the government or something are actually coming to the school, and, like trying to take the goat teacher away who's, losing his ability to speak. At some point in here, Elphaba does also like overhear other, former teachers and other talking animals kind of talking amongst themselves about these plots as well. I would have actually liked to see a lot more of those animals. I don't know if they come back in part 2, but I assume they do. So anyway, then Elphaba accidentally uses her magic again, and she actually, exposes the poppy powder to everyone and knocks them all out, except for Prince Fiero. And he actually helps her rescue a lion cub who's being held imprisoned until they lose the ability to speak. And they both go off and again have another one of those charged moments. I would be curious about how this all plays out on the stage versus in the movie. But yeah, you do just get the sense that Elphaba and the prince are meant to be together, and he just kind of like defaulted to Galinda when she didn't quite go for him the way they wanted to. And then quickly after that, we immediately like ramp up into the third act. And the third act involves Elphaba has written a letter to the Wizard of Oz, who she aspires to meet and to do things with, and basically informing him about what's going on with the animals and the professors, and just sort of warning and saying, I want to come talk to you about this. And she's actually invited to go to the Emerald City. So she boards a train, and Galinda actually jumps on too, and they both go and travel to the Emerald City. This all is very well done too. It's like reminiscent if anyone's ever gone to New York City for the first time. It's exactly that same feel of being overwhelmed but also excited. And there's a lot of great action here too. You get a really great and quick cameo from Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth, kind of doing some cute back and forth. I don't know if those characters were from the stage musical, if they just wrote them into the play, but it was a nice little bit. Maybe it went on like a tad too long, but aside from that, it was very cute. And we hear some backstory about the Grimoire and the Wizard of Oz and how he got there. And we see lots of good performances, more choreography of like people dancing around. I'm not sure if that was a reference to a character from the book, like some creatures with no arms or something. It seemed like something from Narnia books, if anything. But anyway, we got more choreography, more great, like really great practical sets and all that stuff. And they're finally called in to see the wizard, and wouldn't you know, it's Jeff Goldblum, and they have this really awesome mechanical mask. It's supposed to be the wizard that I assume is being controlled practically on the set. We get some nice, soft shoe work from Jeff Goldblum, and just him being charming and effortless and all that stuff. And Michelle Yeoh appears, and they both just ask her, Alphaba, if she can read the Grimoire, which she's able to do immediately. And they say, hey, maybe you could put some wings on these monkeys, or apes, and no, the monkeys. And they immediately get the wings, but it seems very painful. And she says, I don't know if I want to do this. And Jeff Goldblum, as the Wizard of Oz, accidentally gives away the game by saying, oh, those will be excellent spies. And she says, spies? So then we quickly realize that he and Michelle Yeoh are the ones pushing this effort to get rid of the talking animals and dumb them down and just get them put away, and as a convenient scapegoat enemy to, and very on the nose, having a goat, and have them be the enemy, so everyone else will give their power, willingly to the wizard and to her. And from there, it just ramps up again. All the guards have been informed, and people are openly calling Alphaba the Wicked Witch, and she's been deemed a criminal or like a terrorist because of what she did to the apes and the monkeys, and everyone's chasing after her. This builds very naturally to the defying gravity moment. Alphaba does the spell on herself, and she realizes that she can fly using a broom and the wind, and this leads to a sort of a tragic moment where she has to leave Galinda there, even though Galinda wants to come with her. And we assume, or I assume people know already based on the second part, but she's obviously going to become part of the government and do this manhunt as well, since obviously we saw by the end that she's the agent of the government. So I assume a lot more tragic stuff is going to happen in part 2, and we'll learn more about the magic and why Alphaba is green and all that stuff. But just in general, saying all this stuff, I don't think gives a good sense of why this musical is so good and why it works so well. First of all, every single person in the cast is giving it their all. All the main characters are really well cast, from Alphaba to Galinda to the professors to the background characters. I did also want to mention there is a character who's literally called Bach Woodsman. So it kind of made me thinking, is that character going to mysteriously lose all their limbs and become a tin person in the next movie? So let's see. Or maybe it's just a cute reference. Because, of course, in the books, I think his name's actually Nick, maybe Nick Woodsman, but that's who the Tin Woodsman becomes when he falls in love with a witch's daughter, and she chants the axe. He cuts off all his limbs, very RoboCop style. But anyway, what I would just say for the takeaway for this film is the visuals are amazing. I happen to see this in IMAX, but I'm sure it looks just as good in 3D or in regular vision. But just the visuals were crystal clear, a lot of practical stuff again, so that showed up beautifully. And just it's put together in a very intimate and close way, while also allowing room, of course, for the big bombast and spectacle. It has all the qualities of a Broadway musical, but at home, obviously, or in the theaters, in the sense that it has all those great jokes and, entertainment and, great themes as well that all get baked in. And I'm sure I'm just speaking to the choir, people who've already seen the musical a billion years ago. But in any case, that's never to be taken for granted, that just because you have a good musical that you're going to have a good movie adaptation. Just look at the producers, for one example. I'm sure there's a billion other, Dear Evan Hansen or something. So I also think just the way they did the music, I think they recorded a lot on set, or just had them sing, which is good because you can feel the passion and the effort and all that stuff, firsthand. So anyway, I would definitely say this is worth seeing in theaters if you can, and will also be really good after the fact. Again, lots of really good visuals. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cynthia Erivo or Ariane were nominated for some big award, based just on the strength of their performances. You really do get to be on the side of Alphaba throughout. And just Alphaba's look in general was amazing and iconic, and whoever did the makeup did a really good job. And throughout, obviously, the wardrobe is outstanding. Just thinking about set decorating or dressing all these extras would make one crazy. And the themes are super important, and just as a big Oz fan, it's nice to see Oz represented so well, even if obviously they're twisting the story a significant amount. So yeah, great music, great storyline, great acting, great effects, really powerful. The one negative is that this is part 1, which they're very circumspect to admit to, which means that we'll have to wait another year to finally get the emotional payoff. Personally, I think it should have just been one long movie with like maybe a little intermission in the middle. But that's not what they went with. Obviously, they want to recoup their investment a little bit more than they have. So yeah, if you have been any passing interest in this movie, even if you don't like musicals necessarily, you should really go see this, and I think you'll really have a great time. And even if you don't see it in theaters, I think it'll play just as well at home as well. So for Positive Takes, thank you for watching.